Father Michael Turner's obsession with Layla Ahmed began as a secret glance in Manchester, but it ended in Istanbul with her disappearance, his vanishing, and only a crucifix pulled from the Bosphorus to tell their chilling story. Father Michael Turner was a man admired by his parishioners in Manchester. To many, he embodied discipline, devotion, and an unwavering faith. His sermons were calm, his presence steady, and his life seemed bound by the rules he preached. Yet beneath the robe and the carefully practiced image, there lived a man who was deeply restless. That restlessness found its object one winter evening when he saw Layla Ahmed for the first time. She had enrolled in a local language class held near the church hall, and though she never attended his services, her path often crossed his. Layla was quiet, reserved, and carried herself with a grace that spoke of both dignity and distance. Michael found himself lingering near windows just to watch her leave, and soon her face became an image he could not shake from his mind. What began as a passing notice turned into a silent obsession. Michael started to justify his thoughts by convincing himself that he wanted to guide her spiritually, to bring her closer to God. But the truth was darker. It was not faith that drew him toward her. It was desire, veiled under the guise of salvation. Layla never once encouraged him. She lived her life without knowing the depth of his fixation. To her, he was simply a figure in the background, no more significant than the other faces she passed on the street. Michael's mind, however, twisted the smallest details into signs. The way she lowered her eyes when someone spoke to her, the way she carried her books pressed against her chest, all became fuel for his growing obsession. The life of calm routine that once defined him was now fractured. Every prayer he uttered was shadowed by a name he could not forget. Layla had unknowingly awakened something dangerous. When Layla announced to her classmates that she would be leaving for Turkey to spend time with her relatives, it was just another piece of ordinary news. For Father Michael Turner, however, it was a devastating blow. The thought of her absence unsettled him in ways he could not explain. In the quiet of his chambers, he felt panic tighten around him. To let her go seemed unbearable, and soon the idea of following her took root in his mind. At first, he resisted, convincing himself that it was madness. But the more he prayed, the stronger the temptation became, until he began to interpret his obsession as a divine calling. Within days, Michael arranged his affairs with startling secrecy. He left no explanation for the church, only vague words about needing time for reflection. Tickets were booked, and within a week he was boarding a flight to Istanbul. To those around him, he vanished without warning, but to him, this journey felt inevitable. Layla had left for a family visit, unaware of the shadow her presence had cast across the priest's heart. Arriving in Turkey, Michael was immediately struck by the unfamiliar sights and sounds. The call to prayer echoed from distant mosques, and crowds moved with an energy he had never experienced back home. But his focus was not on the city, it was on her. Every step, every decision he made was dictated by the thought of staying close to Layla. He rented a modest room and began tracing her path, moving carefully to avoid being noticed. What was an innocent family trip for Layla was rapidly becoming something sinister. She sought comfort in her homeland, but Michael saw it as destiny. In his mind, this was no coincidence. He believed he was meant to follow. Istanbul was alive with color and sound, its streets humming with a rhythm that never seemed to pause. Crowds filled the markets, and the smell of spices drifted through narrow alleys. For Layla, it was a comforting return to her roots. She had missed the warmth of her cousin Yasmin, who welcomed her into a home filled with laughter and familiarity. Together they wandered the city, visited family, and shared meals that reminded Layla of her childhood. It was a chance to feel safe, to find peace in familiar traditions. Unbeknownst to her, Father Michael Turner had already woven himself into the fabric of her new environment. He rented a small apartment across from Yasmin's building, the windows positioned just right to catch glimpses of Layla's movements. From there, he became a silent observer, documenting her days with unsettling precision. Each morning, he waited for the sound of the door closing, each evening for the flicker of light returning through her window. He was no longer merely curious, he was consumed. Yasmin, protective by nature, soon sensed something wrong. In bustling streets, she noticed a tall foreigner lingering too often in the background. He was there at the market, near the mosque, even outside the cafe they visited. His presence was quiet but heavy, like a shadow that refused to leave. Layla dismissed it as coincidence, too eager to enjoy her time at home to dwell on suspicion. But Yasmin was not convinced. The city, vast as it was, seemed to shrink under Michael's obsession. In every crowd, he searched for her face. To him, Istanbul was no longer a sprawling metropolis of millions. It was a stage set for one figure, and he believed himself chosen to watch her every step. Yasmin's instincts sharpened each day. The feeling of being watched was not paranoia to her, it was reality. She had grown up in Istanbul, knew its streets, its rhythms, and its people. The stranger's face did not belong, and the more she noticed him, the more her unease grew. He was there too often, always close but never engaged, always watching but never speaking. His pale features and clerical manner made him stand out in the sea of locals, and Yasmin's protective nature flared. One evening, while she and Layla shopped in a crowded market, Yasmin spotted him again. He pretended to admire rugs, but his eyes followed Layla. Yasmin's patience snapped. With the courage of someone unwilling to let fear dictate her family's safety, she approached. Confronting him in a public space was her way of stripping him of power. He smiled politely, speaking in broken Turkish and insisting he was simply a tourist fascinated by the culture. His words were practiced, his demeanor calm, but Yasmin felt a chill. She knew lies when she heard them. Returning to Layla, Yasmin kept her concerns guarded. Layla, gentle and trusting, dismissed the idea of being followed. She saw the world with softer eyes, believing people meant no harm. To her, the priest was just another traveler passing through, harmless and unimportant. Yasmin did not argue further, but the thought lodged in her mind like a thorn. For Michael, the confrontation only deepened his fixation. Being noticed thrilled him in ways he could not admit. It gave the chase a new intensity. He no longer felt invisible. He felt connected to their lives. What was meant as a warning from Yasmin became, in his twisted view, an invitation. The line between devotion and danger blurred further. The days in Istanbul moved quickly, filled with family visits and evening gatherings, until one night when everything changed. Layla left the house for evening prayers at a nearby mosque. It was a short walk she had taken countless times before, a routine that gave her peace. Yasmin expected her to return within the hour, but as time stretched on, worry began to creep in. Calls to Layla's phone went unanswered, and when Yasmin retraced the familiar route, there was no sign of her cousin. The streets that usually felt so alive now seemed cold and indifferent, swallowing Layla without leaving a trace. By midnight, panic had set in. Yasmin contacted the police, reporting her cousin missing. Officers responded quickly, aware of the urgency when women disappeared in crowded cities. Neighbors were questioned, cameras from nearby shops were reviewed, and the search spread across the district. Among the names that surfaced, one stood out, Father Michael Turner. His face had been noticed in the area more than once, and Yasmin wasted no time pointing him out. To her, suspicion fell naturally on the foreigner who had lingered too close for too long. Police located Michael in his rented flat and brought him in for questioning. He appeared calm, almost relieved, as if expecting their arrival. He explained that he was a traveler, staying in the city to learn its history. He denied knowing Layla beyond a passing glance. With no evidence tying him to her disappearance, the authorities had little choice but to release him. The case grew colder by the day. Layla's absence left a void impossible to fill, and Yasmin was consumed with guilt for not acting sooner. Somewhere in the city, truth lay hidden, but for now, it remained buried in silence. 90 days after Layla's disappearance, the waters of the Bosphorus carried an unsettling secret. On a gray morning, fishermen hauling their nets felt resistance heavier than the usual catch. Expecting debris, they pulled harder, only to find something gleaming among the ropes. It was a golden crucifix, ornate and heavy, tangled in seaweed. Its polished surface caught the light even through layers of grime. Etched into the back were initials. MT, the same initials belonging to Father Michael Turner. News of the discovery spread quickly, stirring whispers across Istanbul. The crucifix was not just an ornament. It was a priest's personal symbol of faith, something rarely abandoned. Investigators, already pressured by the unsolved disappearance of Layla Ahmed, now faced a chilling link between the missing woman and the priest who had quietly vanished. The waterlogged relic deepened the mystery, suggesting that Michael had not only been involved but had perhaps met his own end. Police divers scoured the waters for further evidence, but no body surfaced. The crucifix became the only tangible clue, its presence raising more questions than answers. How had it ended up miles from Michael's flat? Was it a sign he had been killed and disposed of, or had he deliberately cast it into the river as part of some ritual? Yasmin, when shown the crucifix, felt her stomach twist. To her, it confirmed what she had feared all along. Michael was at the heart of Layla's disappearance. Yet the lack of a body left everything in uncertainty. Without concrete proof, the case teetered between suspicion and myth. For the public, the crucifix was enough to fuel speculation. It symbolized not faith, but obsession, a haunting reminder that both Layla and Michael were now swallowed by shadows, leaving only silence behind. Investigators turned their focus to Father Michael Turner's small apartment, hoping the crucifix was not the only trace he left behind. Inside, the air was stale, the curtains drawn tightly as if the rooms themselves had secrets to hide. At first glance, the space looked ordinary: neatly folded clothes, books stacked carefully on a desk, and a half-burned candle by the window. But as drawers and cupboards were opened, a darker picture began to emerge. In one drawer, police found stacks of notebooks filled with obsessively detailed entries. Each page documented Layla's daily life: the time she left home, the color of her clothing, the places she visited. Some passages were written with chilling intensity, describing her movements with the precision of a watchman. Red circles on folded maps highlighted mosques, markets, and side streets. It was clear he had been following her every step. More disturbing was a locked wooden box hidden beneath his bed. Inside were photographs of Layla taken without her knowledge. Some were blurred, captured from a distance, while others were disturbingly close, showing her unaware of being watched. Alongside the photos were personal items: a scarf that resembled one Layla once wore, and a set of prayer beads identical to those she carried. Whether he had stolen them or collected them in secret remained unknown. The evidence painted Michael not as a harmless priest, but as a man consumed by obsession. Yet, even with the disturbing discoveries, one thing was missing: any direct link to Layla's fate. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no trace of her within the apartment. What remained was a portrait of a predator whose mind blurred devotion with possession. The crucifix had opened the door to suspicion, and the notebooks confirmed it. Michael's obsession had crossed a dangerous line. The discovery of the notebooks and photographs gave police enough grounds to prepare an arrest warrant for Father Michael Turner. Yet when they returned to his apartment, he was already gone. The front door was locked from the inside, but the rooms were empty, as though he had slipped away into the night without a trace. His passport, wallet, and suitcase were found neatly stacked on the table, untouched. Even his clerical robe hung in the closet, but neighbors swore they had seen him wandering the streets the evening before, dressed in full priest attire. The sudden disappearance unsettled investigators. If Michael had planned to flee, why leave behind every document and possession that could have aided his escape? Some theorized he had drowned in the Bosphorus, perhaps throwing himself into the water in despair. Others suspected someone close to Layla had taken justice into their own hands, silencing him before police could act. But without evidence, every theory was nothing more than speculation. Witnesses near the docks claimed they saw a tall man in black robes walking toward the water late at night, his crucifix glinting faintly in the lamplight. By morning, no one matching his description remained. Search teams scoured the shoreline, but found nothing. For Yasmin, his vanishing brought no comfort. Instead, it deepened her fear that Michael had orchestrated something far darker than anyone imagined. The idea of him still roaming free haunted her, the thought that he could be watching from the shadows unbearable. The investigation stalled, balanced between two mysteries: a missing woman and a missing priest. The crucifix was the only clue binding them together, but with Michael gone, the truth felt further away than ever. Silence replaced answers, leaving only unanswered questions behind. Yasmin's life unraveled in the weeks that followed Michael's disappearance. The police closed in on dead ends, and the city moved on, but she remained haunted by the silence of her cousin's absence. Sleep became rare, replaced by restless nights filled with fear. Then, without warning, the nightmare took a more personal turn. A plain envelope appeared at her doorstep one morning. Inside was a photograph of Layla, standing outside the mosque where she had last been seen. Across the back, in shaky handwriting, was a symbol of a cross. At first, Yasmin dismissed it as a cruel prank, but when more envelopes arrived, her denial faded. Each one contained different images, some of Layla walking the markets, others taken inside her own neighborhood. The detail was disturbing, as if the photographer had been close enough to breathe the same air. The handwriting, too, felt eerily familiar, echoing the style of Michael's notes found in the apartment. But if he had vanished, who was sending them now? Fear not at Yasmin's every step. She stopped going out alone, checked locks twice at night, and avoided speaking about the letters to anyone but the police. Yet even they struggled to provide answers, unable to prove whether Michael was alive or if someone else had taken on his twisted obsession. For Yasmin, the photographs became a torment. They forced her to relive the uncertainty of Layla's final days, each image mocking her inability to protect her cousin. What unsettled her most was a single photo that appeared last, Layla standing with Yasmin, both smiling, unaware of the camera. Someone had been watching them together. It confirmed her worst fear. Layla had not been the only target. The shadow that once followed her cousin had now turned its gaze directly onto her. The case eventually faded from official records, labeled unresolved. Yet for those who lived through it, the questions never stopped. Layla's disappearance remained unsolved. Her body never recovered. Her last steps unknown. Father Michael Turner's fate was equally elusive. His crucifix, fished from the Bosphorus, stood as the only undeniable link between the two. Beyond that, there was nothing. No proof of murder, no confirmation of suicide, no evidence of escape. Both lives had simply vanished, leaving behind fragments that refused to form a complete picture. For Yasmin, the unanswered ending was the hardest to bear. She was forced to live with uncertainty, never knowing whether her cousin had suffered, whether justice had been carried out, or whether the man who had haunted their lives still walked free. The envelopes of photographs stopped as abruptly as they had begun, leaving her to wonder if Michael himself had been silenced, or if another unseen figure had grown tired of the game. The silence was almost more terrifying than the images had been. In Istanbul, whispers circulated in tea houses and crowded markets. Some claimed Michael had been murdered by men within Layla's community, determined to protect her honor. Others insisted he had joined a secret order and disappeared into the mountains. A darker theory suggested he had offered himself to the waters in a ritual, believing death beside the woman he desired was a form of eternal union. None of these rumors could be proven, but each added fuel to a story that would not die. To this day, all that remains is the crucifix, gleaming, heavy, and silent. It lies locked away in police archives, a symbol of obsession, faith, and unanswered questions. The truth of Layla and Michael's fate rests somewhere beyond reach, hidden forever in shadows.